But what about the economy of Cape Town? What about property? What about business? What about tourism? How big is the impact going to be?
Well, I think that is really the serious question. While obviously one empathizes with the plight of the citizens. I mean, obviously this is what it's all about. But at the end of the day, we're going to find that the citizens are going to survive. They're going to go into survival mode, and they're going to go into sort of this medieval era, and they're going to collect water, and they're going to do what it is that medieval people used to do, which is not being very productive in the economy. So now we get to the medium to longer term situation. What's going to happen to the economy? Well, Cape Town is a beautiful city, and it's a city wedged between ocean and mountain. It's got the best of everything. It's got very inflated land prices. So I would suggest to you that you might well have a property bubble. So if you now have a property bubble, and now you start doing scenario planning from the property bubble, what happens now? If the value of real estate is inflated, and it now goes through a market correction, what are the implications, for example, if you're a small Airbnb owner and you've just taken out a bond from a bank to fund your Airbnb business, but now you've taken out that bond on the inflated value of it. So in other words, the ripple effect of this is quite phenomenal. And if you start digging deeper and you start saying, well, okay, that's only on the real estate side. What about the farm workers that are currently being laid off, and they might have loans from the bank that they have to service? How can they service those loans? Now we go one step further. What is the capacity of the banking infrastructure in the Western Cape to take that hit without having a ripple effect across the rest of the country? So now we start going to a completely different set of scenarios. But this is the economy. So we've got to get into that new paradigm of abundance, because we've got to understand that water is a fundamental enabler of the economy.
You understand it. Do the politicians understand it? Does business understand it? Has the reality sunk in that we have one hell of a problem?
My short answer to that is I don't think so. But I will caveat that. So the first thing that I'd like to say is that I'm very grateful that we have now gone through a very traumatic political process, and we now finally have what I believe to be a credible president. And that credible president is something that I think we should all support, because we now need a good, credible president. Having said that, what disappoints me about the Sono, and I will caveat that as well, he was only in the job for 24 hours, so maybe he didn't get all of his ducks in a row. But what disturbed me about Sono was water was only mentioned 4 times. And in no times when water was mentioned it mentioned as a strategic enabler. It was mentioned once as a water meter company in South Africa is an example of how we must use local enterprise to create jobs. Well, that's great, but it's not an enabler. The second thing was the war on leaks. There's a war on leaks, so we're going to train a whole bunch of plumbers. That's not going to change the economy, okay? The other one was about getting our infrastructure up and running. That's also not going to change the economy. So we've got to get this conversation about water as an economic enabler. Water as no longer water as a constraint. Water as something that we can do differently, and something that in fact we should do differently. So that's my caveat around the president. Around business, I've had a team of professionals that have been out there for the last 2 years telling corporates about, be prepared, this is coming. And eyes are glazed over almost across the board. And in fact, I was in a big corporate just a year ago, and I was telling them that they happen to own a laundry. And I happened to say to them that maybe you should think about this whole laundry business differently. And they said, what's it going to cost? And we gave a number. They said, oh, no, way too much expensive. I'm very pleased to say that same group of companies has just committed to cutting-edge technology, the first of its kind on the continent of Africa. So that very same company whose eyes glazed over a year ago has now laid a brand new foundation for absolute first-world technology to come into South Africa for the recovery of wastewater, and it's ideally suited for places like hotels, hospitality industry, etc., etc.